It is time for part two of the NFL Combine preview as things will kick off this week in Indy. I'm Glenn Naughton with JetNation Radio and JetNation.com. Be sure to log into JetNation.com where you can register and become a part of what is the most active Jets message board on the web. If you saw it a couple days ago, Dylan and I did offense, and then we thought, you know what, probably best we split this into two because there are a million dudes at the Combine. I'd actually like to see the first couple of Combines, how many guys got invited. Because it could be my imagination. It feels like they add guys every year. I would bet there's more D linemen there this year than there were players at all at the first one. It's kind of insane. But how are we doing, Dylan?
I'm doing well. Yeah, I think the total number they said was 329 prospects at this year's combine. I would assume that when this all started, even 10, 15 years ago, it was probably like in the 180, 190 range. Maybe, I'm sure you'll look it up. But there's no way they were inviting 330 prospects year over year. And I know we had a down year. I think it was last year due to the NIL and the extra COVID eligibility year. And now we're kind of getting out of that. So now more people are not necessarily being forced to declare, but they're running out of college eligibility. So we're going to see these classes getting bigger and bigger again. Obviously, we split it up into two shows because we just love the draft so much that we spent 45 minutes and we were halfway through wide receivers. So that was a fun show. I believe that was Saturday night. So go back and check that one out after this one. But yeah, tonight's all defense. Some of the big fatties up front. Start off with 64 names. Glenn's going to read them all off, all the entire D-line that was invited, and we're going to get
And I will pronounce everyone's name correctly.
100%, yep.
Real quick, according to NFLCombine.net, which I did not realize was a thing, the inaugural Combine had a total of 163 players. So, yeah.
Just right where I said, yep, that's
gotten
that's
a
funny
little
how
bit bigger since then.
Doubled up, yep.
So there are 1,000 D linemen, not a ton of linebackers, fair number of DBs, because it would be nice if they broke them up into safety and corner. Same with D line. It'd be nice if they broke them down into edge, end, and DT, but they don't. So it is a very, very, very long list. And we'll do what we did the other day, rather than go through and read the name of every single guy, because there will be a couple of, especially small school guys we haven't watched, or some guys, I watched a couple of guys yesterday who they're going to the Combine, but they just didn't play much in college. So there's not a ton of film on them, which is hard to find, or it makes it hard to find. So I'll start with the DTs or the D linemen and just go down the list and jump out with any guys who I like. As I said the other day, and I did that piece for Jet Nation, this DT class is unbelievable. Daniel Jeremiah, I actually looked up the tweet because I remember he tweeted something about it a couple weeks ago. He said last year he had 12 defensive tackles with starting grades. This year it's literally double that. It's 24. He's got 24 DTs in this class with starting grades. And here's the funny thing. What's that?
I was going to say, with that said, you're on the board of drafting too, correct?
Yeah, I'm not saying you gotta, but I'm saying that'd be a good idea. That'd be smart.
Even if you got a tweener and then a true defensive tackle, like a JFM type, and then a Al Woods type guy. Yeah,
something like that. And it doesn't have to be, I started a thread on Jet Nation, or the article that I wrote generates a thread. And a lot of people that, that's a great idea. Let's draft 7 defensive tackles. What a good idea. Let's just take nothing. And it's like, all right, if you can't acknowledge the fact that we just watched the Philadelphia Eagles win the Super Bowl based largely on the fact that you couldn't block their interior.
Yep.
And the Jets have 1 D tackle, that worries anybody in Quinnen Williams. And look, they have some guys behind him who might be nice players, but they're not viewed as starting players who can start now or in the next year or two. So I just feel like if you have a need and you see the value that it brings, then take a guy with one of your first 3, with one of your in the top 3 rounds, and take another one between rounds 4 and 7. I'm not saying it's got to be your top 2 or your 2 out of your top 3.
Right.
Especially again, when there's 24 guys that you view as a starter, and obviously I'm just using the DJ number. Then get a guy later. Some of these guys are going to be available later on, and some of them are going to bust. So take 2 of them. But I'll jump in and just go down the list. Again, this will be edge guys as well. Some of these guys, like I said, I still haven't watched. Like Zach Biggers, Georgia Tech, have not watched him yet. Tyler Batty, I haven't watched yet. But the vast majority, the overwhelming majority of these guys, I have watched, and I like a fair number of them. And we're not going to split it with end and tackle. We'll just go down the list and pick out names. Um, Jordan Birch, Oregon. Now he's a first rounder. He's an edge guy. Ridiculous measurements, 6'6", sort of 275, 285, I believe. But just a big guy, uses those long limbs to disrupt passing lanes. Getting after the quarterback. He's got. I don't know. Did he measure? I'm trying to think what his length is. And sometimes we do see different measurements once they show up at the combine. But he's got long limbs. He's 6'6". Freakish build, so he's going to be a valuable guy. His teammate, Jamari Caldwell, if you look at our background there, he's the guy that's featured on there. As I said a few days ago, I hadn't watched him until a couple weeks ago, and one game, and I was like, this guy's a dude. Like, I want this guy. 340, his lateral movement, his ability. I mean, obviously, you would expect him to be strong at the point of attack and hold up against double teams, which he does that well. You see him beat double teams, but also just the movement skills, really impressive to me for a guy who weighs 340. I would love to pair him with Quinnen Williams if you can throw him in there. Abdul Carter, I mean, there's really not a lot to say about him. Arguably the best player in the draft. There's really not a whole lot to say there. Howard Cross the third out of Notre Dame. I thought he was going to come out last year. I like him a lot. I think I kept hearing, what was it, on the Spielman podcast, the with the first pick, they kept talking about his weight. Like, there was some publications had him as 270 and others had him as 295. And it's so they were like, we don't know what he really is, but what he is a dude with a nonstop motor who gets after it. I think he can be a really good player. He can be one of those guys who isn't necessarily a first round pick, but he can go get it. Joshua Farmer, Florida State, another dude that I hadn't watched much of this year. Watched him, I want to say yesterday or the day before, throwing a few FSU games, and you just keep it. Like I said, I think I said it a couple days ago. Like, literally every 4, 5, 6 days, I find another guy where I'm like, gladly take that guy, gladly have that guy in the lineup.
I was going to say, we're going to have to break this up into chunks, or else I'm going to forget all the things I want to say about these prospects. Real quick, Florida State, Josh Farmer had an interview with Dom C, and he said he wants to play with Jermaine Johnson again. And to your point about Howard Cross, the fightingirish.com, the team website, has him listed at 6'1", 288. But I think the more interesting point here is he's from Paramus, so a local kid. That would be awesome to get him in the fold.
Well, I'm assuming senior was the guy who played for the Giants, right? Howard Cross, who played for the Giants.
I didn't know that. That could be a thing.
Yeah. I'm assuming, but I just
I could look it up.
Yeah, as soon as the first time I heard his name, I was like, okay, that's the guy who played for the Giants, tight end with the Giants, number 87, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, former footballer, now broadcaster.
Yeah,
Giants. Yep.
So yeah, Jersey makes sense for him. Was there anyone else you wanted to jump in on before I keep going?
No, Jamari Caldwell, obviously we used him as the background because of how highly we think of him. And then just one name you forgot at the top, Darius Alexander. He's a special player from Toledo that honestly I could see going to the Eagles, like you mentioned, because they're going to lose Milton Williams, and I'd like to see how they plan on replacing that, because that was their bread and butter to getting the ring.
Okay. Next guy up that I'll throw out there, Ashton Gillott from Louisville. He's one of those guys I've been watching for a few years now. Just consistently makes plays. He's got the size. He's like 270, 275. So he's another one, holds up well at the point, but also does a good job of getting to the quarterback. He's not going to get you 15 sacks, or he didn't do that in college, but 7, 8, 9 sacks. And I could see that translating as a pro. Mason Graham, everyone knows about him, sort of the consensus number one interior lineman in the class. There are a few people who say, maybe he's not, but I think, between Spielman, I was actually watching something today. I think it was Joel Klatt had that on his background noise while I was clipping some highlights. And I heard him just going over the top about how amazing Graham's film is. And Graham's a unicorn. Mm-hmm. He looks like an athletic freak, or I shouldn't say he plays like an athletic freak. He doesn't have the guy that coming off the bus look that you want, but he's going to go in the top 10. his teammate Kenneth Grant's an interesting one because he's sort of, he's a guy that generally I think most mocks I've seen have him going in round 2, but
Mhm.
lately everyone's like he's a round 1 pick. There's no way. But
Yeah.
I say this every year though, right? Every year we have 50 guys who are going to be round 1 picks.
Yes.
Depending on what I mean, really, it's probably closer to 100. Because
W
everyone's got to like plant their flag with a hot take, and
Yeah,
this guy's
yep.
going in the first round, and it's like there's 32 guys going the first round. That's it.
The
And
final, like, 6 of the mock drafts, everybody tries to get, like, cheeky and throw their guy in there or
yeah,
whatever, and it's like, DJ, like, as example, like, he might only have 15 first-round grades, but the consensus in the social media world has 90 of these prospects considered as first-round players, so it's just funny the whole swing of things during the draft process.
yeah, I think, and that might be being honest here and being critical of myself. I don't know, critical or I think that's why, and not consciously, just as we're having this conversation, I'm thinking, I think that's why I've kind of taken to saying top 50. I've been saying
Mhm.
that a lot. I think this guy's a top 50 guy. I mean, A,
Yeah.
because I think it's
It's
true,
safer, but yeah,
but B,
it's
because it's ridiculous. I'm not going to name 96 dudes who are going to be first round picks.
yeah, if you
I
said
might name 96
75
who are going to be
guys,
top 50,
yeah,
but I'm going
yeah,
to be closer than the people who named 96 for the top 32.
100%.
Um, so it's one of those things where I have to kind of, be honest about, or just try not to say, it just becomes so cliche. This guy's
Mhm.
a first round. This guy's going to sneak into the first round. Like,
Yeah,
not everyone is going to sneak into the
yeah.
first round.
I just
Um,
love the definitiveness of the statement that they're gonna be a first rounder. It's like, okay, yeah, we're still
yeah.
2
And,
months
and I, and
out.
I
We
love, I love when people get like offended. Like, oh, you're so stupid. I can't believe you think that. Right.
Yeah,
Because there's never any surprises in the draft. Everyone
yeah,
always goes exactly where you think they're going to go.
exactly. But
Um,
real quick with Kenneth Grant, he
yep.
has the come off the bus look about
Yes.
him. Like, what is he, 340, 6'3" versus 6'2", 315 and Mason Graham. So I get it, like Mason Graham's the better prospect, but Kenneth Grant's the one you want coming off the bus first to intimidate your opponent.
Yeah. He's, let me see. I'm trying to see. Yeah, not that. I was going to see what I had on him. I actually just finished downloading like 400 clips of guys I've clipped this week and putting them into my main folder. So I was trying to find him, but for some reason it's not linking right now. But yeah, Grant's a big dude. He moves really well. Aggressive down the line, chasing down running backs, things like that. I think he's going to be. I don't think it's crazy to say he's going to be a first rounder, but they're not all going in the first round. Even just DTs,
Yeah.
right? I've seen a lot of. I looked at DJ's latest top 50, and he's got 6 defensive tackles in there and 2 guys who just fell out of the top 50. So he's probably got 8 in his top 55.
So how
That's a
many do
lot of
you
good
think
DTs early
go
on.
in the because I know his rankings don't exactly mirror his mocks. If
Right.
if he has 6 and then 2 fringe in the top 50, you might only see 5 go in the top
Yeah.
50. So
Yep.
it's going to be interesting to see because it is the strength of the class. People might get want to say, hey, I can get a guy in the 3rd round instead of trying to come up and get a guy in the 1st or early 2nd round. I can wait till the 3rd or 4th round and get a guy of 70% of the guy and not waste the draft capital or not waste it, but you know what I'm saying.
Right. Right. Mike Green, sort of a guy everyone's talking about out of
Hmm.
Marshall, lit up the Senior Bowl. I thought that his bull rush, he's a smaller guy going up against some of these 320, 330-pound DTs. He didn't get a lot of push in the bowl. He did have the one against Connerly where, you kind of flipped him from the left side to the right side,
Yeah.
and he's playing out of position. He had one bad rep, and it's all I was glad that dude won Offensive Lineman of the Week because like he has
Yes.
a bad rep, and he's all of
Yeah.
a sudden, oh, that guy sucks. I knew he was overrated. Like,
Yeah.
chill out. Like, just
People went way
relax.
too far up with Mike Green off that rep and way too far down on Connerly on that rep. And I'm
Yes.
like, we got to come back to the middle, guys. Like Mike Green is a great player, but so is Connerly. He's one of those
Yeah.
guys that I'm coming around to maybe at pick 42, like we were talking about on Saturday. Like there's guys there at the early 2nd round, and he might be one of them.
Yep. Derek Harmon, the third Oregon lineman or D lineman mentioned here, and he is the higher rated of the two between him and Caldwell on the interior. But
Hmm.
he's one of those guys, Dylan, every year, and I was actually thinking about this earlier. Um, I and maybe I'll do it. Like I think I mentioned to you and Chris last year pre-draft. I wanted to do some articles on guys who were playing alongside first round talents, so who
Hmm.
weren't getting enough love.
Mhm.
And I feel like Caldwell fits that description with Harmon next to him. And last year it was opposite Olu. Was it Walker? Who's the guy playing opposite Olu? He ended up going to the Packers being a starting tackle all
Rasheed
year.
Walker, yeah.
Yeah, Walker. That's it. Like I remember I was watching Olu and I messaged you and Chris and I'm like, have you guys watched Rasheed Walker yet? Because he looks really
Yes.
good to me. And I'm
Mhm.
like, but everyone's talking about Olu. And then Rasheed ends up starting. And that's exactly what I thought of the other day when I watched Caldwell. And I'm like, everyone's talking about Harmon, but this dude is not like, and I think it was Mike Renner who said at the Senior Bowl, like that he thought Caldwell looked great, and
Mhm.
he thought everyone's talking about Harmon, but don't count Caldwell. And you get that every year. There's always those handful of guys where you're like, okay, great player, but has anyone looked at his teammate and who's also really good?
Yep.
And
And
it
I
could work both ways. Sometimes you look better because of that first rounder being on the line
right.
helping you.
Yeah, you have to find the balance there too, and I honestly think that's a perfect discussion from Harmon to go right into the next guy I wanted you to talk about, and I was hoping you'd talk about, but I'm just gonna skip it and do it anyway. Tonka Hemingway from South Carolina.
Yes.
I was watching Jackson Dart earlier today, so it was
Hmm.
Ole Miss versus South Carolina. I came away with a list of 5 South Carolina guys that I just need to watch by like the end of this week and see what their combine measurements are. And one of them is Tonka. And it's because he's playing next to a guy who I loved in Kyle Kennard on the edge, who's probably like a early day 2, mid day 2 round pick at this point. And the other interior guy he's playing next to is TJ Sanders, who's getting a lot of love in this draft process. And I think
Yes.
he's even getting like late first round buzz too. So he's another guy that, is kind of getting overshadowed. Tonka Hemingway, I'm talking about. And
Here's
Glenn has a
Tonka
clip here, sacking the quarterback.
coming right up the middle. I'm sure it's because of the number 91, but again, he's another dude I've been watching for a couple years. I always think of Sheldon Richardson, but it's just the 91 more so than a
Sure.
player comp. Interesting thing about him though, him and JJ Pagui, who I'd mentioned a few weeks ago, both getting some opportunities to run the football. Hemingway more of a goal line guy only, whereas with JJ Pagui, you're seeing him getting carries in the
Yeah.
middle of the field.
In that game
Um,
specifically, Ole Miss versus South Carolina, Pagui had a rushing touchdown out of their weird like wing tee with a defensive tackle, and they do like a lot of direct snaps to him. So that's one thing I did observe with that offense.
yeah, and see, this is the other thing with Hemingway. I think the first game I watched him, this might have been the first game, I forget, but it was seeing a DT number 91 running the ball on the goal line because the Jets did that
Oh,
with
this is like a
Sheldon Richardson a
true
few
handoff.
times too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Pagui doesn't get the true handoffs. He's usually more of like the direct snap
direct
guy.
snap, yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
But both really good players, Pagui and Hemingway. I think I would feel pretty safe saying Pagui will test better athletically,
Hmm.
but Hemingway again another one of those guys who is a really good player. Was there someone else you mentioned in there?
No, I just wanted to mention him before you kept going with the list, so I didn't forget my
Okay,
story.
gotcha. Um, Hassanine from Boise State watched 2 of their games earlier in the year. Another sort of JFM type in terms of I'm not saying he's a JFM guy. I just mean in terms of his size, he's got some versatility. He probably could play inside a little bit. And I should double check that because I'm going off the top of my head. I haven't gone back to watch him since early in the year, but I remember having that thought when I saw him because he was listed as an edge guy, and I'm watching him. I'm like, this guy's not your typical edge. He's a big dude.
Hmm.
But he held up well. He'll be a day 3 pick. And that's the thing too. Sometimes we talk about how we like these players, but that doesn't mean sometimes I find myself raving about a guy, but then when I stop and think about it, I'm like, well, he's probably a UDFA, but I just like
Sure.
a lot of the things he does.
Yeah.
And
And really,
he's
the
sort of
range from like a sixth rounder to a UDFA is so
isn't
slim anyway
yeah,
that like if you said, "Oh, I could see him sneaking into the sixth round," and he doesn't go drafted, it's like, "Oh, Glenn, you're such a no,
yeah,
you're right there." It's the same thing. The grade on an actual like sheet for an evaluator is like decimals apart
yeah,
from UDFA to sixth rounder, even fifth rounder to a degree.
yep, yeah, absolutely. So you got Hemingway. Jared Ivey, Mississippi. I like him a lot. I think that he can be a solid player off the edge. Again, they have some that Mississippi line, much like the Oregon line, really good up front. A lot of guys on there. Cam
Hmm.
Jackson. I don't know what he's got his weight at this point, but He's a large man, or at least he was when he started playing at Florida. But he can be another sort of interior guy.
Senior Bowl had him at 6'6.5", 339, with
Yeah, I feel like
83 and an eighth or 83 and a quarter inch wingspan, 34 and an eighth inch arm. So he's a big long player.
yeah, I feel like he weighed a little heavier than that a year or two ago, but he's still, again, 339, still a big dude. Landon Jackson, who I thought he looked good at the Senior Bowl. He's he's a guy, Arkansas D end, holds up fairly well against the run, strong lower half, but also good motor, gets after the quarterback. I like him a lot. I feel like he can be good. Connor, how we doing, buddy?
What's up, Connor?
Connor Long jumping in the chat here. I know that the JetNation folks messaged me that I know you did a show, Dylan, and I know Connor was we were going to try to set something up for me to do a show. I just got to get the info from JetNation. They messaged me a few days ago and said, "Hey, Connor reached out," so we'll try to set that up. Ja Joyner, Minnesota. Not sure if you've watched him yet, Dylan.
Just Senior Bowl stuff.
Yeah, another good player off the edge who I think again. We're talking a lot about the DTs. It's a good edge class. There's a lot of edge guys here. Kyle Kennard, I'm sure you must have had this happen, Dylan. I probably Kyle Kennard and Membu, who we talked about yesterday, the tackle from Mizzou. Both those guys, like, they're guys that I hadn't watched, and then when I did, because I hadn't watched them, I thought like, "Ooh, I found a gem nobody's talking about." And it's like, no, it's just a dude you haven't heard about. Like, I watch a game. I'm like, this dude is awesome. I'm like, let me see if anyone's talking about him. There's people like, oh, yeah, he's a first round pick. I'm like, oh, damn. I'm late to the party, but it's just like, I'm not cheating off other people's notes.
Right.
And, for both of us, we're both like doing this independently. You're going to just get to guys in a different order.
Yep.
Same with
the
Membu.
Patrick Star moment. You're just under a rock for a little bit. You just haven't seen him. That's it.
Yeah, it's like
for one man shows. It's so hard to watch. He's
player 746. I'm watching this year. Sorry he wasn't in the top 500.
And to be fair, you do start with like the later guys and kind of work your way up.
Always do.
If he's a top round guy, like you've already heard about him. Maybe you have and just didn't think about it. So it's like everybody's process is different. So yeah.
Yeah, it's I think that for me, I think that's like what kind of keeps me interested. Like when we're 6-7 months away from the draft, I'm like, do I really need to sit down and watch 100 guys that I've seen, even without trying to see, that I've read about a million times, without like, let me look at some people I've not seen or heard of, I guess sort of again, finding new players kind of makes the process exciting. So yeah, every year it's that last couple weeks before the draft that I do the majority of the work on the big name guys. But again, the big names they're so big, you see them without even trying to look at them.
Yeah.
You're going to see them play a smaller school and dominate and be like, oh, okay, I see what that guy can do, why everyone's talking about him. But Kennard was really good player.
Yeah, 100%. Like I said, watching Ole Miss today, he did the infamous. He sacked Jackson Dart, and I know you saw this on social media going viral. He literally did the machine gun celebration and unloaded on Jackson Dart.
Yeah.
And then all the refs throw the flags, which is funny on all 22. It's so funny the stuff you catch on all 22 that's not on the broadcast, because you don't see all the refs who actually throw flags, because almost everyone threw their flag. So it's just funny. And the whole clip that went viral was just funny. So Kennard, good player, bad moment for sure.
Yeah.
But,
I was going to say, I'm sure the coaches thought it was hilarious. Oh, look, everyone threw a flag at once. Isn't that awesome?
A sack and then a free first down. Yeah, coaches are not going to love that.
Yeah. Next
and they were losing 24-3 when it happened.
Yeah, that's the other thing. It's an old school thing, but it didn't used to be a thing where you would celebrate while you were getting your ass kicked, but now guys do it. They're like, I don't care if we're down 50. I just made a play. Whoa! Yeah.
Just do the Larry Fitzgerald. Hand it back to the ref and get back in the huddle.
Yeah, Marcus Allen, touchdown. Here's the ball, Mr. Referee. I'm going to go back to the bench now.
Yeah, act like you've been here before.
I forget what it was or when it would. I can't remember if I was looking for a particular play. This is a couple of years ago. But I put on a game that I remembered watching like in the 80s. I don't know if I was looking for Wesley Walker highlights or Mark Gastineau, something like that. And that was something that jumped out at me. Like, guys played and then they went back to the huddle. Like, getting up and signaling first down didn't exist. It was like the game's not over yet. I still got work to do. So I'm going to get up and go to the huddle and we're going to run the next play. Whereas today it's like, oh, we got a 40-second look at me clock. So I'm going to do a dance and a backflip and because I got a 6-yard gain. Just didn't used to be a thing. But anyway, back to the prospects. Walter Nolan, he's another guy right up there with Grant, who I've been seeing as a early second round projection for most of this season. And I just kept thinking, well, if these people have it right, like I want him or Deion Walker at the top of round 2. But now one's even pre-Senior Bowl, but then especially Senior Bowl, everyone's like first rounder. I'm seeing him in the top 15, top 20. And deservedly so. He's that good of a player.
Yeah, people have him as DT2 a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you see a lot of these projections and you can't believe it, but you hope they're right. Like, please tell me that guy's going to be on the board when the Jets are picking in the second round.
Those are run the card up type players at 42.
Exactly. Omar Norman Lott, I think I mentioned I talked to Dom C about him last night. And I watched a couple of Tennessee games last night, or it was 2 nights ago. And then last night I watched a couple of his games. He's one of those guys, as we say, sometimes you just think guys are going to be better as pros. He wasn't very productive in college, but really good off the ball. Disruptive. What does Spielman always say? Disruptive, but not productive, right? Like the numbers aren't there on the stat sheet, but you're disrupting the game. And that's what you get a lot with him. And I think with a good coaching staff and a good system, he could be an impact guy. James Pierce, I think everyone knows about. He was sort of a consensus first rounder coming into the year.
Yep.
Aeneas Peebles. I mean, there's so many. Aeneas Peebles, love his get off intensity. He was one of my guys going into the Senior Bowl, and he had a really good week down there. JJ Pagui, I already mentioned. Let's see. I'm trying not to mention 50 guys. Ty Robinson, Nebraska, like him a lot. Jack Sawyer, Ohio. I think he's sort of a consensus. He's a guy that everybody's talking about, that everybody loves. Let's see. And
what are your thoughts on
Emmanuel? Sorry?
I was going to say, what are your thoughts on the 2 Texas A&M guys, Nick Scorton and Shamar Stewart? Shamar Stewart is like another one that's disruptive over productive.
Right.
And 4.5 sacks in college over 3 seasons. But when you move the way you move at 281, 285 pounds, and there's rumors that he could run in the low 4.5s or possibly high 4.4s, like that's stupid.
No way.
And you know how people get hyped up in the combine, so I'm not
saying
if
he runs in the 4.4s.
Right. He's in play at 7. 100% agree with you there.
Top 10 pick. If
I said it a couple weeks
running the 4.4s, you're top 10 pick.
Yeah, I said a couple weeks ago we could trade down, get cute to like 12, 13, and try to get Mike Green or Shamar Stewart. If he runs in the 4.4s, he might not even be there. Jacksonville might snag him at 5. So it's one of those interesting things with him. But he's a specimen. But more like Nick Scorton. What are your thoughts on him?
Let me see. Scorton.
I don't know if their scheme fits. It's hard for me to plot them. I don't have the measurables on Scorton right now, but I don't know. It seems like 6'5", 280, that could be a 4.3 D end for us. If we stick with the 4.3, I don't even know. We could be a hybrid or more 3-4 base, excuse me. But I don't know if Scorton's measurables or film to me said he would be a scheme fit.
I like his motor here. You see the effort. You see him coming from the far end all the way around, getting the quarterback off his spot. Look at that. I mean, that to me, that's again, he's not 280, but he's a big enough guy that when you can pull off something like that, that's impressive. He's got the spin, change of direction, and chasing him down. They're both really good players. Dom says 280 on Scorton. So are they both that big?
Damn.
I think we talked about them a few months ago.
Gosh.
Yeah, we talked about them a few months ago, and I confused them. We were talking about one, and I was talking about the other, and I realized it afterward, but I think they are. I didn't realize they were both that big. I knew they were both bigger guys, but really
Dom,
good
what
players.
are your measurements on Shamar Turner now that we have you in the chat? Shamar Turner, their defensive tackle as well, because did they just have 3 of the biggest defensive linemen they could find in terms of height and weight and just say go get them? Because they're scary.
They really are. That's let me see I've got to have something on Shamar Turner.
And another player you might have stuff on, because I feel like he dominated in 2023 probably more so than I think he did in 2024. JT Tumalau, the edge from Ohio State. I don't know if you have any clips of him, but I know that he, like I said, had a higher trajectory last year than this year. Excuse me.
Yeah, I think that in fact when I did Dom's podcast, I believe I took him with like the 31st or 32nd pick, and I said he's a guy who I don't think is getting talked about enough as a first rounder.
Mm-hmm.
And as I always say, we always love a little confirmation bias from someone on the inside, and I know I think it was I can't remember. I think it was Spielman, but it was they did a first round mock, all 32 picks, and someone took Tuamaloau in the first round. And I think that he's a guy who, because there's so much talent on that defense, if he played on most other college teams, they would sort of build the defense around him, and he would put up huge numbers. But
Mm-hmm.
they're like, well, we're Ohio State, so we're just going to tell you to do what we need you to do, and we're going to win anyway.
Do your
Um,
111th and we'll be fine. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So let's see if I have anything on him. If you want to throw up some other names
Yeah, I was going to
there.
say real quick, I just saw a tweet come down from Jordan Schultz, somewhat breaking draft news. Top NFL brass called and officially invited LSU consensus All-American offensive tackle Will Campbell to the draft in Green Bay. The NFL is planning on being very selective this year and only plans on inviting 8 to 10 players who they feel are all top picks. So that'll be something to watch too, because at pick 7, you expect your guy to walk across the podium, grab the jersey from Roger Goodell, give him the big hug, and do all that. So it'll be interesting to see what 8 to 10 players get invited to the draft.
I have been saying for years, like they invite too many guys, and that's how you get these embarrassing moments of dudes sitting
Just
there for
cameras staring at them. Yep.
yeah. And
Hate that. I hate that. Yep.
and yeah, so I've been saying for years, like they need to put an end to that. Here's Tuamaloau
Mm-hmm.
lined up on the right side of the formation. That right end spot just blows right past the tackle. I mean, to be fair, that's a poor job. Nobody lays a hand on him.
No.
He just comes in completely untouched. But a versatile guy. I think he can play a few different spots. I think that anytime you have a defensive head coach, a defensive minded head coach, I would imagine they want to bring in, some versatile players who give you that ability to play. And like I look at a guy like Danny Stutzman, and we'll get to linebackers in a minute. I watch him and I think, God, that guy would really help this defense because he's so strong against the run. But I feel like he's a liability in coverage, and I don't know if he'll be an option for the Jets. I think they'll want to get bigger. I think they'll let Sherwood walk because he's smaller. If you look at the Detroit Lions roster and look at all their linebackers, not every single one of them, but almost all of them are 235 plus. And right
Mm-hmm.
now the Jets have a couple of guys who are 220, and
Yep.
one of them's a free agent. So I think they let Sherwood walk. And I think you go out and you replace him with a bigger backer. And like I said, Stutzman's a guy. I think I've been watching him for a few years now, and I really like him. But I just in coverage, I think he's too much of a liability. And we will, like I said, we'll get to him in a second. Let's see if we get any other D linemen you want to discuss, Dylan.
No, you talked about Princely, Mielin, excuse me, Dion Walker. You talked about, I guess, maybe just Mykel Williams and Tyleik Williams. A lot of people get them confused. I'm not very versed in either one of them. If you had any notes on them, I see Wild Wave said Mykel and Scorton remind him of Alton Smith. They're both pups who have tremendous upside. And I mean, it depends on where you take them, but usually you shoot for upside in the draft. So if you're looking at second rounders for these guys, I know Mykel Williams is getting a lot of first round buzz in mock drafts. Tyleik Williams, maybe back end of first round, second round at pick 42. Could you see them possibly taking both? How do you see these guys?
Yeah, I've watched more of Tyleik than Mykel Williams.
Okay.
Both getting a ton of buzz. Obviously, coming out of Georgia and Ohio State, respectively, monster programs. And I think he does a good job. Plays with a good pad level, powerful, good off the snap. I think I don't think he's going to get to the quarterback a ton as a pro, but I think he'll be a disruptive guy. He'll get a handful of sacks, and good against the run. But a guy we jumped over here, Dylan, who I thought had a really good week in Mobile, CJ West out of Indiana.
Mm.
Any thoughts on him? Again, I've watched the All 22, but you were there, saw him in person. What were your thoughts on him?
CJ West, I didn't have him. I have him as a Shrine Bowl, not a Senior Bowl candidate here. That's surprising. So no, I don't.
No,
I
I
don't.
could be mixing up because I was watching because they go on at the same time. So I was
Yeah,
watching
yeah.
clips from
I was gonna
both.
say I would have had his measurables in if he was at the Senior Bowl, so I don't have his measurables.
Yeah, and
Maybe I
now that
just
you say it, you're right. He was a Shrine
okay.
Bowl guy.
Okay. I was gonna say because I have no notes on CJ West. That was a complete curveball. I thought you were gonna say David Walker, the defensive tackle from Central Arkansas, is the standout from
But he's more of
Mobile.
an edge. I think he's
Okay, yeah, yeah, he is more of an
yeah.
edge. You're right. You're right. But that's who I thought you were going for. So I was getting ready to talk about him, but no, CJ West, I have no notes on.
Let me see. I think I have or I know I have some clips on him because I've watched a few of his games.
But yeah, David
Um,
Walker to me is interesting. Another one we skipped over. He's only 6 foot 5/8, 31 and 3/4 inch arms. So I know he played edge at Central Arkansas, and they have him kind of listed that way. But maybe he does have to move inside just due to his length. I don't know, but he's only 267. So like, do you bulk up? That's an interesting one.
there's CJ West against Michigan. So he's not a guy who's out there doing it against smaller programs. I mean, Indiana played some good schools this year.
Yeah,
But there you
yeah,
see
they did,
West
and
getting
they
in the
had a good
backfield.
run. Yep.
Yeah, and he's like I said, from what I watched of him, again I was simultaneously watching the bowl practices as they were popping up on YouTube and seeing what I could find online. He really jumped out at me, and I actually watched the Shrine Bowl about a week ago. And there were a few guys who popped out, and he was one of them. Let me see if we have who else did you mention? There was one other. Oh,
Uh,
Walker, right?
David Walker. Yep, that was the last
I
one.
I actually was watching a running back last. I can't even remember the kid's name. I just found them on an obscure prospect list, and I was at work and it was 4 a.m. So I was like, let's pull up the school I've never seen before. But they were playing Central Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
So just by chance, and CJ Walker made a couple of, or no, sorry, David Walker made a couple of good plays. Here's what I like this one. The way it's almost like a cheesy movie, the way he like fully extends himself and leaps at this quarterback here and just basically envelops the QB on this sack. Um, it's slowing up here. Here we go. Both arms full, and I if I'm not mistaken, I think, and I don't know how you do this. I think he's unblocked. Yeah, he's just.
Oh, it looks like a screen where the left tackle just
Yep,
leaves him on.
and he
Just
just gets
put an
in
arm
there.
on him and stop him.
Yeah, do something like put
Yeah. Side
the.
note: these are awesome turf. Like this is awesome turf patterns. I love
Yeah,
Central
yeah. Who
Arkansas.
was it? It was Lamar. Lamar at Central Arkansas. Um,
You were really deep in the archives.
Central Arkansas has got a running back who I really like.
Okay.
Let me see,
Is
who
he
I
draft
posted a bit of
eligible?
his stuff this offseason. What's his name? Number 27. It's got a. It's not a common last name.
Mm.
Um, I posted some clips. I'll have to look at those. But yeah, I think that he had himself a really good week in Mobile, and he is a guy, David Walker, I'm talking about. I did watch a little bit of him. I don't know if it was this offseason or early this year, but once they started talking about him, I pulled up the highlights I had of him, and then it kind of jogged my memory, and I thought he looked pretty good. So some value there. And again, the interesting thing, Spielman compared him to Brandon Graham. That was his pro comp. That's a really good player. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
if you're in the Jets, if you feel that way about a guy and you're in that Jets war room, I would imagine you're in Moogie's ear saying, this guy's a really good value pick here.
Brandon
Um,
Graham coming off like a major injury that was thought to be season ending and probably career ending, and they give up Bryce Huff's active roster spot for him in the Super Bowl. You gotta love
I
it.
can't. What are they going to do with Bryce Huff? You got to cut him, right?
I don't
I don't
know.
know
I
what the
think the
cap
money
hit is,
doesn't kick
but
in. I don't think the money kicks in until the third year of the contract. So realistically, they could move off of him, but it depends on what happens in free agency. I don't know what their D-line free agents look like, but if they lose like Josh Sweat or whoever, on an expiring contract, maybe you need Bryce Huff in 2025. But it seemed like Vic Fangio and him did not see eye to eye, which, sorry, but I said it thousands of times. The grass isn't always greener and the scheme isn't always nicer to you. And sometimes you have to play coverage on 3rd and 8 instead of rushing the passer, which is what you're supposed to do in the NFL. So when you see guys go from 0 sacks to 10 sacks or vice versa, like Zach Bond, a perfect study, like the opposite way. The Saints didn't use him right. The Eagles did. Bryce Huff, the Jets used him right and the Eagles didn't. It still worked for the Eagles, obviously, but it goes both ways. And I think people only want to see it one way.
Yeah, I don't think they will be cutting him. It looks like I just jumped on over the cap. As a post June 1st cut, Bryce Huff would the Eagles would take on 19 million in dead money,
Yeah.
and a pre June 1st cut would be 29 million in dead money.
Mm-mm.
So I don't think he's going anywhere, and they don't seem to
Nope.
have a role for him. So that's I mean, we'll see what they do. And listen, whatever the Jets are going to do, I don't know that he'd be a fit here for whatever Aaron Glenn and Steve Wilkes are going to be doing.
Right. He would have been a
But
fit last year. We know that, but this year, obviously, everything's kind of up for debate.
yeah, exactly. So I think that's everyone. Oh,
Yeah.
Princely Emmanuel, who I mentioned, I watched him as a freshman at Florida, and I thought this guy might be a first round pick. And I think there are some years he would be a first round pick. He just
Sure.
happens to be coming out in a year where the D line and the edge is absolutely stacked. So some of these guys are going to fall, and he might be one of those. He might go in the first, but I think he's got a chance to fall. Which again, when you talk about top of round 2 picks for the Jets, um, I'd have no problem with somebody like him.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Linebackers, let's see. Jahad Campbell obviously getting tons of love all over the internet as the draft gets closer.
Yep. Dom
Again,
C stamp of approval.
what's that?
The Dom C stamp of approval on Jahad
Yeah,
Campbell.
yeah, exactly. I think that he's a guy. Having said, I don't watch a ton of the top guys. I've seen enough of him in just passively watching Alabama opponents, where
Yes.
it's like, wow, this guy's lining up all over the place. This guy, he's making plays from all over the field. So you understand the hype there with him. Barrett Carter from Clemson, I feel like he's a guy whose stock has fallen significantly from the offseason. I remember late last year and during the offseason, people saying this guy was going to be linebacker 1 first round pick in this class, and now you don't really see that. You don't see any of those, or you don't hear any of those conversations. I think he's a good player,
Mm-hmm.
but that you don't hear people talk about him that way. Power Eccles, I mean, one of the best names in the draft.
I
Power,
was gonna,
that's a pretty
yeah.
awesome name, and he hits like it. Like he is appropriately named. Whoever named him knew he was going to be a linebacker, because that dude is he's a big time hitter, but he's a mid late round pick. Um, let's see, Kobe King from Penn State. Just watched him the other day. Good motor, good athlete. Cody Lindenberg from Minnesota. He's the guy I look at when I talk about needing these bigger backers who can cover a little bit. I think
Mm-hmm.
Lindenberg, for example, would be a much better option for the Jets than Danny Stutzman. Both bigger linebackers, but I think Lindenberg does a better job in coverage. Nick Martin from Oklahoma. Liked him a lot. Thought he played well down inside, and it was someone the other day who mentioned and posted some highlights of him covering down the field, and I was like, oh wow, like I already liked him as a guy in the box, a linebacker coming downhill, and he covers a lot better than I realized. So I apparently, obviously, hadn't seen enough of him to realize that part of his game was a strength. Francisco Mauigoa, he is of the Deion Henley class. I'm familiar with him because a few years ago when I watched every snap of Deion Henley, Mauigoa was with Washington State at that point. And he's a really good player. He transferred to Miami. I think he'll be a solid pro. Jalen McLeod, another one, solid pro from Auburn. Not overly athletic, but a fundamentally sound guy. So many times you see guys now, again, another way the game's changed. I hate how often you see guys throw a shoulder at somebody and just try to make the highlight reel hit. You don't really see that with McLeod, at least not the games that I watch. I didn't see it. He seemed like a fundamentally sound guy. Colin Oliver, Oklahoma State. I think I talked to you about him pre-Senior Bowl. He was a guy that I thought would flash in Mobile. He didn't. He really didn't do much of anything from what I recall seeing and hearing. He's just a guy that over the past couple of years when I watch him, he's always making plays. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't turn on a game that he's playing in and not see a sack or a big QB pressure that gets the quarterback off his spot, something along those lines. Stutzman, we talked about. Jalen Walker, absolute stud, first round pick. Again, a guy that you see in passing, but watched him recently. He's absolutely phenomenal. Carson Schweisinger, I think he's that guy who can cover really well, but I think he's going to come in a little too small for what the Jets are looking for. Dom in the chat Saying have I watched Bassa? Not extensively, Dom. Just a couple of highlights. I haven't watched them extensively yet.
I was gonna ask you. Mentioned you talked about Jalen McLeod from Auburn. If you had any notes on his teammate Eugene Asante, they were both Senior Bowl guys. Because linebacker is a position I truthfully haven't studied more, so I'm gonna have to talk to you more offline about the coverage linebackers specifically. But
Right.
Senior Bowl, you don't get a good look at these guys either. So any notes on the other Auburn linebacker
Honestly,
Eugene
very
Asante?
little on him. I actually just
Sure.
checked a lot. I have literally have one play of him, probably from last year. Um, and I don't know my glasses on. I'm having a hard time picking them out. Let's see. Watch
At
that
least
one
you
more
numbered him,
time.
number 15. Oh, okay. Yeah, it looks like he just comes in, gets a nice ankle tackle.
Try that one more time. Yeah. So Asante, I've not. McLeod is a guy who jumped out more to me than Asante did. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a ton on him. Again, like I said, one clip. Anytime I have one clip, it usually means I haven't done a whole lot on the guy or haven't he didn't do enough in the games I watched to jump out and make me feel like I got to get some highlights of this guy. He's really good.
Yeah.
Um, so
I
yeah, he's
saw I saw a tweet earlier, Shamar James from Florida. He's only going to be 20 when he's drafted. So I think that's a huge benefit for him. Again, another Senior Bowl guy. Jack Kaiser, again, another Senior Bowl guy. I thought he had a fine week in Mobile. Nothing too spectacular. I thought he's okay. Demetrius Knight, another guy I watched today while watching Ole Miss, South Carolina. And it's funny, I'm watching Jackson Dart, but like sticking around for all the defensive guys on South Carolina. There are just so many of them.
yeah.
And then Nick Eman had a cool pass breakup or near interception, like right out the gates too. So you just saw everybody shine in that game. Got to shout out the Rutgers guy, Tyrene Powell, local kid. Smail, I guess it's Smail, like Ismail, but just Smail Mondin Jr. from Georgia was another guy I wanted to ask you about, Senior Bowl guy, but I didn't, again, it's hard to get notes. So did you have anything on the Georgia linebacker? Because I know Jalen Walker, obviously most people at this point know about him, the tweener, but what about Mondin Jr.?
Yeah, haven't seen enough of him to say.
Yeah. He
But
probably
yeah,
gets
like I
lost
said,
in the
that's
shuffle of all the Georgia guys because, like you said, you just turn on
and
that
you
any of
can
those teams.
literally and it was a couple years ago I think that I started ordering my viewing that way because I realized like
Yes.
I can wait till like 3 days before the draft and take 10 or 12 hours and just watch Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State and watch a few of their games each and it's almost like an NFL game. Like the talent is that ridiculous and you get a good look at those guys then. So yeah, it's let's see. Captain Joe King. Hi, can you explain why I'm not excited about Tedero and McMillan? Oh boy, are you trying to get under my skin, Captain Joe? Did Dylan tell you to come in here and say that? Let's see. So he wants to know why isn't he excited about T Mac? I don't really like where he's going in Mach 6, 7, 8. I mean, if his comp is Drake London, he should be late first. He's a more athletic Drake London. He's Drake
Mm-hmm.
London, but better after the catch.
Mm-hmm.
That was those were the two things that jumped out to me when I first watched him a couple years ago. Obviously, the size. You don't even have to watch him play football. You just look at him, you're like, Jesus, that guy's enormous. Um, but the hands, his ability to catch the ball, and then running around and away from defenders with just sort of just quick feet, and the ability to make plays after the catch. That I was like, wow, like you just don't a guy that big, you expect him catch it, turn around, run a straight line,
Yeah.
a couple of weak jukes and get tackled. You don't get that with him. You get consistent, you get consistent hands. I mean, phenomenal hands and playmaking ability after the catch. And look, I'm not saying he's Tyreek Hill, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying he's that level of plays, yards after the catch, but he is better than most guys you'll ever see his size. So the catch radius is going to be, as I've said, if there was a way to measure that accurately at the combine, I would imagine he'd be the number one guy, not just in the class, but like I'm trying to think of an NFL receiver with a wingspan and the height like him and legitimate catch radius. Like it's not
Right.
just he has that radius, but he is consistently fully extended, catching these footballs one handed. I think he's gonna be a playmaker. I said before the year he was my favorite offensive player coming into this class. I think the quarterback play at Arizona this year was a little disappointing from Noah Fafita, who's they were high school teammates, so
Yeah, they
I
were
would
best
imagine
friends. Yeah.
I would imagine if wherever T-Mac goes, if Fafita's not getting drafted, I would imagine him begging a front office to grab him. Or that he might say, hey, grab my guy in round 7 or 6, whatever, whenever you think he's there. As a request. I don't know that a team will do it. Fafita, he was disappointing to me. I watched him late in the year, and I thought really exciting player, smaller, but did a good job of finding open lanes, finding windows to
Mhm.
find his receivers, making big throws on the run. Tough as hell. Like, I saw him get blasted, and he hung in the pocket knowing he was going to get his head ripped off and hung in there and make throws. So I thought this guy's going to be really good. Wasn't that great this year. Not as good as I thought he would be, I should say. McMillan, of course, had like 290 yards or something in week 1 and cooled off a fair bit after that. But
I have this
I think he's going to
clip.
be an immediate impact guy, immediate red zone weapon, and
Mhm.
someone, again, he's Drake London, but better after the catch. So I would have no problem taking him at 7 if I were the Jets. And in fact, as of right now, I still say he's my top choice for guys who will realistically be there. Like, there are a couple of guys I would, or maybe Carter might be the only guy I would take over him. But he's,
Yeah.
and the QBs, but I don't expect them to be there either.
Yeah, you talked about catch radius, and it reminded me of our conversation about George Pickens and his spectacular catchability. And I looked at his measurables, and he's 6'3" and change and 195. And I know Tetero is probably going to come in closer to 200, maybe a little bit above 200. But that catch radius, that spectacular catch, is like, those are the vibes I get. Is like a taller George Pickens, and then he has this at Arizona's practice facility, going up and just high pointing the ball, showing off his athleticism, putting it between his legs twice before he can come down. So he's got all the size and physicality.
Look
That's
at that. Come
yeah,
on.
that's Garrett Wilson versus the Bills. Even the trainer on the sideline is
It's even better. It's
absolutely,
like backhanded, and he catches it
yes,
clean with one
yeah,
hand.
exactly.
And
So
and look, and before anyone says, "Oh, so what? It's practice, big deal." This is
that's when
in a
it's shot.
game,
That's
folks. This is
yeah,
what he does in a game.
yeah.
Get it? Come on.
You know who made a catch like that we raved about last year, and we should have our boy Chris on for this? Ricky Pearsall made a catch very similar to this, and we raved about it. And look where Ricky Pearsall went in the draft. I mean, you just add the traits on top of it. So he's got the size and physicality of everything. Not the physicality, but the size profile that I don't normally covet. But he does all the movement and agility and the yak stuff that I love out of like the slot guys. So it's like, it's so hard for me to wrap my brain around him, and I'm coming to terms with the fact that like he might be one of the first like big wide receivers that I actually like in this process. I didn't like Quentin Johnston. I wasn't a huge DK Metcalf fan at the time. So like all these like taller wide receivers I know that would complement Garrett. Here he is taking a little RPO screen to the not almost to the house, but still.
And again, it's subtle, but you see the quick movements. You see the
Yeah.
ability just
Yeah.
put a foot in the ground, get around a defender, and
Yep.
pick up some yards after the catch.
Might not be breakaway speed, but eventually, I mean, those long strides, they're going to help you in that sense. And he covered a lot of ground really quickly for not having that bursting home run speed. So I'm
Yeah, I'm
definitely a
trying
fan of
to.
him. I don't love him necessarily at 7. And, I like Emeka Egbuka as my wide receiver too. And, maybe it's even closer. I know somebody tweeted this out. I think it was like Dane Brugler or somebody said that Egbuka is closer to wide receiver 1 than he is wide receiver 3. And I said that same thing a couple days
Yeah.
ago. So it's like, I truly believe that. And I know Tetero is number 1. I mean, this is just
Again, look at this. I
silly,
mean, I
just
hope this
silly
answers
stuff.
your question, Captain Joe
Yeah. I
King.
hope you're feeling better
So,
joking
yeah,
about
and
this.
I'm not being facetious. Like, it's just these plays, this grab, this is just insane. Look at that.
That safety 43 was like standing there ready to pick it off, and
Yeah.
McMillan was like, "No, thanks. I'm just gonna take this."
Yeah, he's something else, man.
Fun player.
He's
You can't go
I
wrong. You can't go
yeah.
wrong drafting him, especially if you're the Jets. Maybe other teams in the top 10 it doesn't fit necessarily, but still, it's hard to say that guy is not a fit for nearly any offense based on his size and speed profile.
Yeah, I'll tell you what. If I'm a coach or an owner, and my coordinator comes to me and says, "I can't find a role for that guy in my offense," like, I'm firing him. I'm gonna be like, "Oh, so we got you guys 6'5" who plays like he's 10-7, and you don't know what you can do with him in your offense. Like, get the hell out of my office."
Yeah. All right. Full transparency. Glenn and I said we're going to keep this show under 45 minutes. We were just getting onto the cornerback group and safety group now, but we're fine. We're 10 minutes over, but that's fine.
Yeah, we're all right. Billy Bowman
Yep.
had like 6 picks a couple years. He's another guy. I think I'm on year 3 of watching him. Really like him as a safety. And again, this is where the Jets have a need. So there's quite a few safeties I've been watching. I don't know about you, Dylan.
Mm-hmm.
Kobe Bryant out of Kansas, another guy. I talk about how I've seen so many Washington State guys because of Cam Ward and because of Deion Henley. Excuse me. Fair bit of Kansas too, because I really liked Jalen Daniels.
Yeah.
Excuse me, their quarterback. So I've been watching them for a few years. Kobe Bryant, solid cover guy and physical, not scared to really play with a safety mentality at times. Sebastian Castro, listen, any top safety in the class, any top 20 safety in the class has to be a consideration for the Jets at this point. Castro, not a ball hawk, doesn't get a whole lot of turnovers, but he's a solid player. Nick Emanwori, I don't know if he's worth talking about. They're not taking him at 7, and he's probably not going to be there in the 40s. So he's a guy who, big guy for a safety, really big dude. I don't have his measurements in front of me, but really big player.
You just hope that the positional value knocks him down the board to a position where the Jets are able to take him, in my opinion.
Yeah, exactly. Travis Hunter, the corner / receiver, he obviously won't be there. Will Johnson, see, to me, Dylan, I've said this, and I saw someone mention it earlier. I can't remember if it was on Twitter or the JetNation forums. I think Will Johnson is probably I don't even want to say sneaky. I'm surprised he's not getting talked about more as a possibility for the Jets. If TJ Reed leaves and you're bringing in a corner to be your head coach, he's probably going to have an eye for corners. And if Johnson, I think he will likely go top 7. I don't think he's a lock though. Like I don't think anyone's going to be amazed if he falls to 7.
Yeah.
So do you consider him there at 7 and go with corner a couple of years after taking Sauce, or do you say, you know what, let's take a corner later and let's let JBC and Stiggers compete with the rookie?
Well, it's funny you bring it up because the whole Sauce thing. I know you don't subscribe, but DJ Bienemy was on the Badlands podcast, and he talked about how Jeff Ulbrich told him and Brian Costello to purposefully mock
Saw that
at 4 overall to get Woody to get on board with it. So he big brain 4D chest Woody Johnson into the Sauce Gardner pick. Yeah, I don't mind Will Johnson. Maybe at 7 is a little too rich. I know he's a great player. His agilities do look really special considering he was a Feldman freak. I don't know. It's tough. Like just to play devil's advocate, because I don't really have a leg in the fight either way. I would do it, but I probably wouldn't advise it with it. Aaron Glenn is a former cornerback. Yes, maybe he can get the most out of Eccles, a Stiggers, a JBC, and refine their skills and make them into a starting caliber player. I had this argument with somebody on, I believe it was Boy Green's show a couple Sundays ago. You don't need a top player at every position on defense because
right.
Aaron Glenn has that background in defense. For some reason, Robert Saleh really loved having a ton of blue chip talent on his defense. And I understand it was a very good unit at a lot of times during his tenure, but you should also be able to develop a 3rd or 4th round guy into somebody as well. So I think maybe we see that be the case with CB2, but I can't say that I'd hate it if they went and drafted Will Johnson. He's a really good player.
Yeah, and I think who was I going to get to here? There was I did an article earlier talking about defensive guys to watch at the combine. RJ Mickens. I mean, do you make that pick if you're Aaron Glenn?
Yes.
Here you are, Aaron Glenn. You played your college football with Ray Mickens. You both get drafted and play for the Jets.
I didn't know they both played at Texas A&M. That's cool.
Yeah, I interviewed Mickens years ago, and he talked about how nice it was that when he got drafted, Aaron Glenn had already been in New York for a year. So here was one of his best friends able to show him around New York and get him settled in. Now his son, and listen, whenever I catch that a Jets kid is playing, like I'm gonna watch that guy.
Yeah,
I want to see. So I started watching RJ a couple of years ago. Didn't get a ton of playing time at Clemson early on, as is often the case. But I'll be honest. I thought he was a good, not great cover safety. Like I thought he was good. Like he's good enough to be in the league. Was really surprised. Looked the other day because I was talking to somebody about him and saying I hope the Jets take him because I'd love to have another Mickens back on the Jets, because Ray Mickens, not just a great player, but like class act, class dude, carried himself like a, just like a pro from the day he got in the league. So
Mhm.
always been a huge Ray Mickens fan. But RJ Mickens, his PFF grade for coverage was like through the roof. It was like high 80s or
Oh,
something like
really?
that, which was a little surprising to me. I didn't think it was going to be that high. Dom jumping in with them and Maury size. Yeah, I figured he was in that 225, 230 range and 6'2", 6'3", which is right where he is. That's a big dude for a safety. And listen, if he can pull it off, that's great. I think I've seen him mocked pretty frequently to like Seattle.
Mm,
Um, he may fit there, but whatever the Jets are going to do on defense, they're going to need some safeties.
yeah.
Um,
I
even if
googled it real quick. Mickens over 2,000 defensive snaps worth of experience at Clemson. Had his best year in coverage in 2024 with an 89.8 coverage
yeah,
grade on PFF. That's a dark blue or light blue grade, and everybody knows those are the elite grades on PFF.
yeah, that's and that like I said, I haven't watched a ton of him this year. Previous
Sure.
years, I wish I could remember which game and I was so happy to see it. I watched one game where I was specifically watching to see Mickens, and he didn't like the whole game. He was really quiet. And then whoever they were playing had Clemson had a goal line stand, and I
Mhm.
think he made like 3 tackles in a row. Like stop. I think I think he had a couple of tackles and a PBU, but basically 3 plays in a row with the game on the line. He stepped up and
Yeah.
made a play, and I was
I
like,
love that. I love
I
when
was
you
so
see that
happy for him.
happen. Yeah. I
Yeah,
love
I
when you
was
see
so
that
happy
happen,
for
whether
him.
it's like a linebacker making 2 tackles and then a big,
Yep.
defensive player or like a corner or safety. It's like they stop the drive all by themselves. I love that feeling.
Yeah,
That's
and
cool.
that it's funny you say that. That's why I like Jalen Reed. The first game where I watched
Oh,
him
yeah.
for Penn State, and it was like early on though, first quarter I think. He had like 3 plays in a row, like tackle, PBU, and it's like when you see one guy shut down a drive, that's always it's not an easy thing to do. It's
Mhm.
you gotta be on your game. So yeah, RJ Mickens, man, bring him on board, get him in Jets green, and I do wonder, like I would imagine there's some relationship there already with Aaron Glenn. Would that
Mhm.
make it difficult? I'm not saying it would. I'm just saying I don't know if I basically I hope it wouldn't, and I hope they bring him on board because they do need some help at safety. Where Malachi Moore is
Yep.
another guy who's a big time prospect. Jabbar Muhammad, when I watched Oregon this year, he looked really good in coverage. Good body control. Saw him going up. Got some PBUs, managed to, he's one-on-one with these receivers, avoiding excessive contact, but still getting up in their hip pocket, breaking up some passes. So he was really impressive. Andrew Makuba, the
Yep.
safety out of Texas, again, another safety who will probably be on their radar,
Yeah, I would
along
love
with
a
another.
Makuba as the free safety, the roaming guy. Yeah, I would
Yeah.
love him.
Yeah. So lots of guys there. Jonas Sanker, who we talked about during Senior Bowl week.
Yep.
Um, that seems to it seems like he was getting a lot of love that week, but it's cooled a fair bit, and you don't hear his name a lot. But again, you could easily take 2 safeties given how thin they are at the position right now.
Yeah.
Let's see. Dom says add something about Mickens. The Wilkes scheme is heavily reliant on safeties that can play in man coverage, and that's actually, like I said, I haven't watched a ton of him this year. And when I saw his grade, that PFF grade, I was curious how often that he was in man versus zone, but he did a really nice job for them, and it would be great to see him back. Upton Stout had a really good week in Mobile.
Mhm.
Um, Trying to see if there's
I
anyone else.
I wanted
Xavier
to ask your
Watts.
thoughts on Darian Porter from Iowa State because he's listed at 6'2" and 3/8", which is I think the tallest from all the corners. So you're talking about another tall, lanky guy. Could you see him as like a day 3 pick? That, like I said, you don't go first round swinging with Will Johnson, but you go in like day 2 to find your CB2. Could a Darian Porter be the type there? What do you have on him?
Porter, I've not seen a ton of,
Okay.
but the day three guys who I really like. Well, I say day 3. I've seen some different projections. Teammates actually, one corner and one safety. Noel Williams, the corner, and Craig Woodson, the safety. Williams, really good player. He did a nice job. I
Hmm.
watched Stanford Cal recently to get a look at both him and Ella Camagnor, and they matched up together. And Noel Williams did a really nice job on him, and they actually said during the broadcast, they said, "Oh, last year when these teams played, Williams held Amenyor to 3 catches,
Wow.
and he did a nice job against him again this year." He's a guy production-wise. I thought he would be getting a lot more talk as an early pick, but I've not
Mhm.
heard his name a whole lot. And Craig Woodson, solid in coverage, big-time hitter. I think he'll be a day 3 guy. Well, yeah, based on what a lot of the projections I've seen, he's a day 3 guy. I wouldn't
You said
mind if
he's a
you grabbed him.
safety?
Yeah.
Okay,
Uh,
I had him listed with my corner, so I just wanted to make sure I had all my ducks in a
Yeah,
row here.
and Hunter Waller is a guy that I was planning on watching more of this week
Mhm.
for Wisconsin. And actually, when I talked about the Penn State DBs, I'm looking now. Kevin Winston's name. It might have been him. I forget again.
Yeah,
Teammates.
he went back to school rather, not that he didn't get an invite. He went back to school.
Oh, he's on the list here.
Oh, is he? I didn't have his box checked for combine. Maybe I must have just oversighted it. Okay.
Yeah, he's on the combine
Oh,
list.
you know who I'm getting him confused with? Wasn't it their running back Singleton? That
Yes,
yeah.
yes, he went back.
Wrong TON last name. Weird how my brain did that. Okay, so Winston, yeah, him and you mentioned Jalen Reed. I was gonna ask you about him earlier, but you covered that. You covered Malachi Moore, you said Malachi Starks also. And you started going about Xavier Watts. Did you finish about him?
Just that, I mean, he's probably, in my opinion, like viewed as the number 1 ball hawk safety
Yeah, yeah.
in this class. And again, Billy Bowman, I think he only had 2 picks this year, but he had 6 a year or 2 ago.
Mhm.
Um, so don't write that guy off as
He
being
was getting a lot of oohs and ahs in Mobile during the one-on-one period. I'm not saying he was perfect in coverage every time, but he had a lot of plays where he got a lot of looks from the crowd for sure.
yeah, he's one of those guys that and actually I think it was Jalen Reed. When I was saying earlier
Okay.
about somebody getting a bunch of tackles, and that's who I said
Mhm.
earlier, didn't I?
Yes. Yeah.
Because I'm 99% sure it was number 1, and I just double
Mhm.
checked. He was number 1. Yeah,
All
so
right.
he was the one with 3 tackles and 3
Just
plays.
one last guy we didn't mention, and then we can move on to everybody's favorite special teamers. The Florida State cornerback Azariah Thomas. Did you talk about
Um,
him?
yeah, like I said, watched Florida State this week. Last night actually, probably gonna watch some more of them. But I think he's an early pick, not necessarily a first round pick,
No. In
but
play at 42, maybe.
yeah, like
No.
that kind of range. I could see that happening. And that is what's going to be interesting to see. Does Aaron Glenn say, I believe enough in myself that I think I can grab a guy in round 3 or 4 and make him a starter, or does he say, let's use a 1 or a 2
Yeah.
on a corner?
Or
But
use what we
and
already have. Yeah.
yeah, and I don't know if Dom's still with us. I think Dom is really high on him. I vaguely recollect Dom
Okay. Yeah.
shooting off some tweets about him
And
not long ago.
another guy kind of top of the board in terms of the rankings at the position, Savone Ravel from Eastern Carolina. I know he suffered the ACL
I was
injury,
gonna
so
say
he's
he's the guy that got hurt, so
only
I
doing
haven't watched him.
medicals. But like I haven't done a ton of mock drafts, and for those watching, we will be doing a pre-combine mock draft if we can align our schedules on Wednesday night. So tune in for that right before the combine kicks off. But Savone Ravel, I mean, is he a guy if he slips at 42? Like, would you look at him as well? Because seemed to be a really high-end prospect before the ACL. But does
That's
the risk of the injury deter you at all?
that's the thing. I mean, medically, if he checks out, I think I pull the trigger on it. Even with the injury risk, I think sometimes you got to take advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah,
Listen, sometimes it bites you. The
yeah.
example I always use is Malik Hooker, because I always say, like, don't use, especially I always say, don't use your first round pick on an injury risk. And Malik Hooker had a million injuries in college,
Yeah, he did.
but that's how good he was. I was still like,
Yes.
I would take him.
Yeah,
I would take that risk. I think
the rule breakers.
if he gives you 12, 13 games a year, you're gonna have the best safety in the NFL, at least
Worth
in
it,
terms
yep.
of going and getting the football.
Mhm,
And sure enough, injured all the time, and I would have got fired, but I would have risked it for that dude because he was that good. So yeah, I think if you get a guy who's a projected top 20 pick and he falls to 4, and not just a top 20 pick, but a top 20 pick at a premium position, and he falls to 42,
mhm.
I don't have a problem with rolling the dice on that.
Oh, yeah. It wouldn't be the Bryce Hall thing either where it was like second rounder drop to the 5th round. It would be probably just first rounder drop to the 2nd round. So you're not looking
Yeah.
like a huge drop off. Indy Jets says, "Hey fellas, happy to have you in here."
Thanks for
Just
hopping on.
wrapping it up positionally. We can talk about some of these specialists. I don't know a damn thing about any of them because
No.
as soon as they yell special teams in Mobile, that's when everybody starts to mingle and go get their hot dog and souvenir cup like I did just about every day at practice. You know how that was. So I
Yeah.
guess Andre Borregales from Miami. I guess he's the one that people are talking about the most. There was another one, Ryan Fitzgerald from Florida State. I believe he was the 100% conversion rate guy, if I'm not mistaken, or like inside 40 yards. He didn't miss all last year,
Right.
whatever it was, the stat. There's a couple kickers here that might be draft eligible, but are we staying away from these guys with the draft pick?
Listen, I was
I know it's
thinking
your
the other
favorite
day,
thing to
like,
draft them high.
Zerline is still under contract.
Yeah, they cut Carlson. They didn't cut him. They, I think they still they cut Greg Joseph as well. So like, I think it's just Zerline on the roster.
And I don't know, obviously don't know what the plan is with him, but I
I'm
think
looking it up.
he's a 4 million guy, right? He's they gave him 2 years, 8 million.
Zerline, they gave him a decent bit of money in his contract. I think it was like $2 million a season. So he might be on the books for like $2.5 million.
Let's see. Zerline,
No
4
kickers on the
million.
active roster.
His cap number is 4 million for 2025.
Oof.
Actually it's 4.7 and it's split almost down the middle. 2.3 dead if you cut him, you save 2.4 pre-June 1st. Post-June 1st would be the move.
Yeah.
570,000 dead, 4 million savings.
That's probably what they're going to do because they have Greg Joseph still on the roster, I see, based on their website at least. And then it says Carlson is a future/reserve contract, but I thought they cut him right at the end of the season, or they might have cut him when they picked up Andrew Beck, the tight end/fullback. I can't remember correctly. Maybe they just still have all three kickers on the roster.
And they've added a couple guys since the season ended. I know that.
Yeah, because now they can hold 90 again. So I feel like kicker is not necessarily. I mean, it's a need, yes, but I think draft pick need, no, I don't think so.
Yeah, Indy says day 1 and 2 have to be all offense. I'm not so sure on that, Indy. I'm not saying I would object to it. Like if you got T-Mac at 7, and then you took somebody like a Fannin, like your top tight end at 42, I'd have no problem with that.
Yeah.
But this team couldn't stop the run last year.
Right.
So my preference, again, I mean, my dream scenario, and I feel, I mean, I say that even though I do have some concerns, but my dream scenario is that Deion Walker checks out medically and there are no concerns there. And you go T-Mac at 7, Deion Walker at 42. Those are my 2 favorite players coming into the class. Like my favorite offensive guy was T-Mac. Walker was my favorite defensive guy. Offense, defense, you address receiver because you're going to need one once Adams is gone.
Mm-hmm.
And you need someone next to Quinnen Williams, which one thing we should talk about, and we will at some point in the offseason, but I'm curious. I think in addition, it's funny because I was thinking about, I was looking at the roster one day a few weeks ago, and this name jumped out at me. And then a couple of days later, a buddy of mine sent a message saying, why isn't anyone giving this guy a shot? Fidarian Mathis. Like this was an Alabama kid who was a solid prospect.
Yep.
And I mean, I only looked at the box scores. He put up, he didn't do a whole lot. He didn't get on the field a lot. But he got cut sort of unexpectedly, and the Jets just grabbed him. And Dylan is not with us for the moment.
Oh no! What the fuck just happened?
I don't know, but
no way.
I don't know if you realize we can hear that. I can hear that. Can you hear us, Dylan? Uh-oh. Don't say anything. Don't go on a cursing spree, Dylan. Oh man, I feel like maybe we should end the show before Dylan goes on an F-bomb rampage. We'll see if he jumps back in. Anyway, back to basically Fidarian Mathis, the DT who played for Alabama and got cut last year. But was it Cleveland? I forget who cut him. I can't remember who let him go. But Fidarian Mathis is on the roster right now. And he's a guy who a lot of people coming out thought he could be a, mid-level starter / quality backup. And this is a team that needs help at DT. Like I said, and again, look, I get it. Free agency hasn't hit yet. There's going to be a bunch of guys are gonna get well, we don't know, but you're going to target some of these guys in free agency, I would imagine, because you have a need there. But the thing is, this free agent class isn't very good. It's really not a very solid class, up and down. Now I haven't honed in on the DTs, to be fair, but just kind of browsing the free agent list in recent weeks. Whenever I've taken a peek at it, I'm just like, there's really you're not seeing those names that jump out as strong possibilities. In fact, we should probably line that up. As Dylan said, we'll do a mock this week, um, before things really get rolling in Indy, and then maybe the next episode after that should be top free agent targets. Indy in the chat says we have a defensive coach who proved in Detroit he can take lesser players in the defense and make them better than you'd think. Excuse me. Make them better than you think. And he can take a lesser player on offense and do that. That's what we're going to find out, Indy. Um, that's what we're going to find out. And let's see. That's why I think you take premium players day 1 and 2 for the offensive side. Like I said, I don't necessarily disagree. I don't think it's a lock. I'd like to see T-Mac at 7 and either the best DT on the board at 42 or the best tight end. And in that, go with a second offensive guy. But I'm not sold on the fact that that's what they'll do, because who was it? I believe it was Rich Cimini said, and I think this was even before they hired the coach. I think, and I don't think you needed the new coach to know this. And forgive me if it wasn't Cimini, but somebody said that, internally, the Jets knew they had to rebuild their defense this offseason because you're losing DJ Reed. You don't have another tackle next to Quinnen Williams. You've got Jermaine Johnson coming back off an injury, so he's a huge question mark. So, you lost Huff last year. You've got an injured JJ coming back this year. So that's a couple of big hits. And obviously, Reddick was a huge bust as an edge guy. You traded JFM, which was absolutely ridiculous what you got back for him. So the Jets have lost a lot of firepower in that front seven. If you think about it, JFM's gone, Huff's gone, JJ's going to be coming back off an injury. You let Jefferson walk, you let Woods walk. Kinlaw was a bust. That front seven needs help. They do. And this is the year, especially if you're going DT. This is the class. This is the time to grab 2 of them. If you're just tuning in, I said earlier that Daniel Jeremiah sent out a tweet a couple weeks ago while he was evaluating players and said that, this time last year or just last year in general, he had graded 12 defensive tackles as having starting grades, or guys that would be at a starter level. This year he's got 24. And I've said many times that, throughout this, I've been saying for a couple months now, DT, edge, tight end, those are the 3 deepest spots. And if the Jets double dip at any of those or 2 of those, now you're not going to double dip at 3. There's most of your picks. But I do think we'll see a trade down at some point. I think the Jets will add picks. I don't think they'll be picking. I think they'll pick 10, 11 guys. We'll see how that works out. If you look back at the way he drafted in Minnesota and the way Peyton, who was his right-hand man, the way he drafted in Denver before Sean Payton showed up and I think probably sort of took control a little bit. There was always 9, 10, 11 guys consistently that they took in the draft. So I think we may see some wheeling and dealing to move down a bit and add some capital. Maybe even trade. Well, I don't know if we'll see him trade future assets. Let's see. Okay, yeah. So that covers the comments from Indy Jets. But I guess we'll wrap this one up. We'll figure out what happened with Dylan, who is apparently missing. I'll have to let him know that he was still audibly live for a few seconds after he got the boot. And that'll wrap this one up, Jets fans. As we said, we don't go crazy with the mocks. We don't when the draft rolls around, we're not like, here's mock draft 36.0. We do 2, maybe 3. Normally one before the combine and one at some point after the combine. If there's a big enough gap from that one till the draft, we'll do one the day before the draft. So I could see us doing 3, but I can't see 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's a little bit overboard. Yeah, thanks for that, Indy. I'm terrible at telling people that. Like and subscribe. Press those buttons. Follow us at JN Radio_Glenn on Twitter. Let's see. Let's pull that down. There you go. Right there. Right there. At JN Radio_Glenn. Dylan is at D Terreman, TEREMAN. Give us some follows, interact, talk, engage, talk about the Jets. We love them. We hate them. I say to people all the time, are you really a Jets fan if you don't hate them? Like, if this team doesn't drive you crazy and make you angry, and you're like, everything is awesome and everyone's wonderful and nothing is ever wrong, I don't know how do you get to that place? I understand loving the team, supporting the team, but when I see people that like, oh, don't you criticize the Jets, like, they deserve to be criticized. I don't have to lie about them just because I'm a fan. And I don't think there's anything wrong with telling the truth when the team is bad, which they are. Hopefully they're not for much longer, but I don't see that turning around anytime soon. That'll be something we can discuss in future episodes. How far away is this team? Yeah, we all have mental issues, says Indy Jets. I'll tell you what, man, it takes something special to stick with this team, and especially these last few years. There's Dylan. Laptop died. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Glad you caught my audio reaction. Okay, so I guess Dylan heard me saying that his audio response was live. That was fantastic. So thanks again for tuning in. We will be back, as we said, mock draft sometime this week, and then a free agency preview not long after that. Have a good one, Jets.